It is. Welcome to show number 2 of Still Kicking with Billy Howard. We had a little technical difficulty right there at the beginning, but this is all new to us, this whole live Facebook thing. But we got a great show for you today. We're going to do absolutely no coverage of the General Flynn non-scandal. I mean, I don't even know what that's about. Evidently, he violated some sort of speech code. We're also going to look at the roundups. Is it roundups or reign of terror? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to decide. We're also going to cover AIG gets off again. Yes, another triumph of American fascism. Also, a corporate retailer and a federal judge are victims of free speech, according to the liberal press, yes. And ACLU actually makes a detour from identity politics to protect free speech. And that was the guy at Berkeley, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And we're also going to talk about misunderstanding George Orwell and the corporate press's huge gaping memory hole and much, much more. So stay tuned. Here we are. And we're going to be here live every Tuesday at 7:30, except for today, which is Monday. It's Monday the 13th of February, and we're doing it live today because tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and our mysterious producer, who has to remain anonymous right now, does have a Valentine. So we're doing it tonight. Anyway, thank you all for joining us this evening for our little Tuesday talk on Monday today. And I want to give special praise to my producer, whose name I cannot say, because he has a job and he has to worry about, fascist America. Because in fascist America, we don't, put you in jail or torture you just yet. I mean, unless you live in Chicago. But what we do usually, the way American fascism works, is that you get put on a blacklist and you lose your job. And, you just can't make a living anymore. And that's kind of how it works in America. And I know all about blacklist. I'm on quite a few already. But he is doing a great job. And if it wasn't for my producer, I wouldn't be here with you now. So God bless him. I'm still a Luddite. I'm still groping blindly through life without the internet. And so that means I'm only going to see your post right after the show or right before the show. So when you post and you want me to reply, you have to remember that it might take a week for me to get back to you. And if you want to get right directly to me, you can do it the old-fashioned way and get an envelope and a stamp and write to me. And I'm not afraid to give out my address because I'm a Christian and I know God will protect me. And I have a lot of faith in the American people anyway. I don't think everybody's a sleazebag and a nutcase and ready to kill me. So here's my address. It's 302 Chenoweth Lane. That's Chenoweth, Chenoweth Lane. And that's in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's spelled Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky, 40207. And it is really great to have you here. And I'm coming to you on the internet, even though I'm a Luddite, because I know that full frontal, face-to-face talking is too much for most people these days. So here we are on the internet. We are thinking about putting the internet in my house. I don't really want to do that, but we're having a little trouble finding a good location to do the show from because we have to have Wi-Fi or whatever it is we need, a good signal. Anyway, let me ask you a question. Has the corporate press whipped you into a frenzy of hysterical panic? Even NPR's more low-key, reserved hysteria puts me on edge. I mean, they really do. And I want you to know that Still Kicking with Billy Howard is about replacing that hysteria with reason, because that is the opposite of hysteria. So relax, fear not, and the truth will set us free. Now, I was listening to NPR this week and heard these very dark and ominous reports about roundups of undocumented residents. And I was told that hundreds have been rounded up. Now, they also poured on the fear and the darkness by saying now millions are living in fear. So this is evidently a reign of terror we are under now. And but I noticed that ICE came out and said, look, we're doing it just like we did under Obama. Nothing has changed. And just in case my dear liberal viewers don't know this, Obama rounded up more undocumented residents than any president in U.S. history. So I doubt Trump has surpassed him yet. This is only the third week of our constitutional crisis, which is the Trump presidency. And I will remind my viewers, in case you didn't see the first show, that I am a liberal. I voted for Jill Stein. I gave money to Bernie before Hillary and all her friends stole the election from him, the primary election, since they were big cheaters. And I'm going to talk about that a little later, about what can be done in the Democratic Party, and I think we have to throw them all out because they are bums and they are cheaters. And there is a message from somebody on there if you want to look at it. Anyway, these dark anonymous reports are coming through, and I just noticed that none of this reporting, much less dark reporting, was done during the Obama administration when he was rounding up illegal immigrants. Well, that's what they are. You know, they are illegal. They're not exactly in compliance with the law. But I know there's all this politically correct speech, and all it does is suppress debate, and it does it very, very well. And even I get tripped up on it on this show, and I'm going to try not to. So I think this coverage is a bunch of BS. I don't think that he's doing anything that wrong. And, if we're going to open up our borders, if you really want to just open up the borders and let everybody come, every refugee, every economic immigrant, whatever reason they have to come here, you will soon find that we have about 300 million new citizens, because a lot of people have the money just to buy a ticket and fly in. And you will also find that your apartment rent's going to go through the roof, because all those people are going to need a place to live. And you're also going to find that the minimum wage will become the maximum wage. It's just simple supply and demand. Anybody who's had Econ 101 can tell you that. So there were no coverage of the Obama roundups, and I think they never used that term, roundup, when they did report about Obama's thing. Oh, I also heard that some Ethiopian immigrants crossed into Canada through the woods, and some of them suffered frostbite. And I wondered, well, why did they feel like they had to go through the woods? Well, then I thought, well, it must be because they were afraid Canada wouldn't take them, because we wouldn't stop them from going to Canada. But, they sure are trying to make Trump sound like Hitler, and it's really, really funny. And, of course, as you know, I am a liberal, but I believe that the Democratic Party is no longer liberal. In fact, I would tell you that it is fascist. And what is fascist? Well, Mussolini invented fascism, Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator. And he said, I wished I'd called it corporatism, because all it is letting the corporation merge with the state. And in effect, what that does is let corporations regulate themselves. And isn't that great? And I have always said, and I still say and maintain, that we are in a two-fascist party state, which pretty much equals a one-party fascist state. So you either have the right-wing Democrats or the right-wing Republicans. Take your pick. And yes, Trump is a fascist, no doubt about it, but at least he seems to care about the working man. And you know what? Liberals used to care about the working man. That used to be what they were all about. But now liberals sneer at the working man and call them deplorable and worse. But we'll move on. There was a triumph of fascism today. It was AIG. You've heard of AIG. We bailed them out. In fact, we bailed them out for more money than the whole food stamps program. It was a lot of money. It was hundreds of billions. And Maurice Hank Greenberg, who was the founder of the company, the Wall Street Journal reported this morning, had to pay a $9 million settlement for civil fraud allegations. Now, I read that and I thought, civil fraud? Well, what is the difference between civil fraud and criminal fraud? I mean, see, this is what's great about corporations writing the laws that they have to obey. Anything they do is legal, or at least only a penalty of a fine. So yes, and AIG and Hank Greenberg admitted to initiating and participating and approving these two fraudulent transactions. And the result of these fraudulent transactions was they lied about their financial condition. And then specifically, they bolstered what is called their claims reserves for paying claims. So they made it look bigger than it really was. And Berkshire Hathaway was on the other side of one of those transactions, but they got no jail. Nobody will get jail because this is fascist America, and bankers don't go to jail no matter what they do. And neither do insurance or anybody in the financial industry, evidently. And by the way, AIG paid $1.6 billion to the SEC and the state of New York in 2006, before the crisis, before we had to bail them out. And guess what they had to pay that for? Civil fraud claims. Again, civil fraud, whatever that is. So that fine obviously didn't deter them from committing civil fraud again. So maybe it's time to put some corporate people in jail. Anyway, there's the triumph of the fascist will. Corporations get to regulate themselves, AIG. You also may have heard this week in the news the story of the poor victims at Nordstrom's department store. Now, Nordstrom's is not in Louisville. I don't shop there. I think it's in Seattle. I think I've been to the one in Seattle. Anyway, you know, they dumped Ivanka Trump's fashion line and said it was because of poor sales. But this is the United States of amnesia, and you may have forgotten that they were facing a boycott that was organized on the internet because they carried Ivanka Trump's fashion line. And so they dumped the line and then lied about why they dumped it. And now my friends are telling me Nordstrom's is a victim of Trump's bully pulpit. He's abusing his rights of speech. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Trump can't say what he wants. He can't defend his daughter. Corporations aren't victims. Nordstrom's has an army of lawyers and a whole bunch of law firms they can call at any time. They have many millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars. They are not victims. And they also complained that this federal judge, that Trump shouldn't have said anything about him. Well, you should have seen what Thomas Jefferson said about some federal judges, or what Andrew Jackson said about some federal judges. So, he can say whatever he wants about federal judges, and so can I. That is what the First Amendment's all about, criticizing the government. And the judiciary is part of the government. And unfortunately, so is the corporation. In fact, the corporation pretty much is the government. They do the spying for the government. They collect the data through this show. Big Brother knows you're watching this show. Big Brother knows where we are webcasting from. Big Brother knows it all. And do you know what they do? They sell it to the government. All that data is collected by data miners, and their biggest customer is government. And within government, the biggest customer is law enforcement. So all this data is going into your dossier, not to put you in jail, but to control you. And you will see later on. And of course, it might affect your insurance rates and things like that. So this federal judge is not a victim either of Mr. Trump. And the liberal press will never make me believe that they are victims. The federal judge cannot be fired by Congress or by the president. He cannot have his pay deducted. He has got tenure. He's Fat City. He is protected, unlike all the people who voted for Trump. He is protected. And so are the stockholders of Nordstrom's. I have no sympathy for them. So if the president doesn't have free speech, we don't either. And let's talk about free speech. The ACLU, which I used to be a member of, and I'm not anymore, and that was because during the Bush administration, they went along with this blacklist that Bush came up with. And it was something about, well, if any of these groups contribute to you, then, you'll be defunded by the federal government. And the federal government does fund the ACLU, along with Planned Parenthood and other things. And so the ACLU went along with this blacklist, and I thought at the time it was a huge mistake that they should have denounced it and used it for fundraising, but they went along with it. And I think it shows you how much they care about civil rights to go along with the blacklist. And the reason I don't give to them anymore is that, and also I get a lot of fundraising material for them, even though I haven't paid dues in a long time. And the fundraising material is always about identity politics. It's always about women's rights, abortion rights, all that. It's always about gay rights. Anthony Romero is gay like me. And so he cares about that, and I understand that. But you know, whether it's immigrant rights or gay rights or transgender rights or whatever rights they're fighting for, what about civil rights? What about the Fourth Amendment? You know, I get their fundraising materials. There's nothing about the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment is the one right that keeps the government out of our stuff. It keeps the government out of your home, out of your wallet, out of your records. And the Fourth Amendment was eviscerated by the Patriot Act, the most misnamed piece of legislation in U.S. history. It should have been called the Cowards Act because it was an act of cowardice. We threw away our freedom, our Fourth Amendment, so we could feel safer. And Ben Franklin said, anybody who would do that, anybody who would throw away their freedom for security deserves neither. And I think that's where we are. So the ACLU, you know, I'm glad that they are taking up this case of the guy who was going to speak at Berkeley that was the cause of the riots. Of course, he wasn't the cause. His name is Mr. Yankinopoulos or something like that. I'm sorry, I should know it. But I'm not a journalist. I've only played one on the web. But anyway, they are going to defend him to their credit, you know, and I'll give credit where credit's due. And I love the ACLU, and I wish they would do a better job. I wish they cared about the Fourth Amendment because, you know, the Fourth Amendment affects everybody, blacks, whites, Latinos, legal aliens, gays like me. It affects us all. When the government can just snoop around and collect all this data with the help of Facebook, with the help of Apple, with especially the help of Google. And all these companies, they don't care about your civil rights, not at all. That's why their privacy agreements are indecipherable. That's why they put the real truth at the very bottom in the smallest print, because it's just about greed, and I'm sorry. That's what all this is about. Anyway, so the ACLU is at least doing that. And of course, UCLA Berkeley, where this guy was supposed to speak, is the home of John Yoo. And John Yoo is the legal architect of U.S. torture. He is the one that put this huge stain on our country. Not solely, it's not all John Yoo's fault, but he really was quite instrumental. And Berkeley is hardly a liberal bastion. It's the bastion for torturers is what it is. So I'm not surprised that Berkeley canceled this poor guy's comedy routine. I bet it was funny. All right, let's move on. You're hearing a lot about George Orwell's book, 1984. It's on the top bestseller list. People are reading it, and the press is trying to compare Trump to Big Brother. And, you know, it just so happens I read this book a couple of months ago. I got it at a used bookstore, and I thought, you know, I was supposed to read this in high school. I think I'll read it now since I have a little time. And I got to tell you, Big Brother loved political correctness. He was all about it. He was about anything that would suppress people's free speech. And political correctness does that very, very well. And, you know, Trump is not equal to Big Brother. Trump is more like the character Emmanuel Goldstein. He was the one who was the Big Brother's enemy. He was the one who was for freedom. In fact, Winston Smith is the protagonist in 1984, and he thought the only hope for their society was the proletariat, the workers. And of course, that is why Trump is in the White House, because the workers of this country rebelled. They rebelled against this educated, elitist press that sneered at them. They rebelled, and they put in a guy like Donald Trump who speaks the same way they speak, a guy from Queens, a guy who works with bricklayers and electricians all the time and knows how workers feel. And Trump is smart. He knows that if we increase the wages of workers and increase the numbers of jobs, we will have a stronger economy. We will have stronger domestic demand, which we haven't had since I graduated from college in 1979. We've been suffering from weak domestic demand, and domestic demand is 2/3 of our economy. All this free trade with tyrants is only 1/3. So he's more like Emmanuel Goldstein. And if you read the book, you know that Big Brother made everybody hate on Emmanuel Goldstein. They'd have 2-minute hate sessions where they would put a picture of this Emmanuel Goldstein up and just hate on him and hate on him and hate on him. Well, poor Mr. Trump has to put up with 24/7 hate sessions from NPR, from ABC, NBC, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. They all hate him because these two fascist parties don't want anything to happen to their big cookie jar, these trade deals. These trade deals, they don't want to let go of. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So Big Brother really is our government and the corporations that serve them. The corporations, even poor Mr. Snowden wasn't working for the NSA, he was working for a contractor. So, there's all kinds of corporations doing the evil work of our government. And our government has proven itself to be evil because we tortured. And we tortured on an industrial, global scale. And the press did everything to hide that fact. So, there you go. The press is the biggest enemy of free speech in this country, our corporate press. They suppress open debate on just about every subject, from globalization, and these trade bills. I mean, what details do you know about the TPP? None. Same thing when NAFTA was passed. They wouldn't say anything about what was good about it, what was a drawback, nothing. They just didn't cover it. Same thing with immigration. If you want to talk about what it does to labor markets, some highly paid corporate reporter will call you a racist. And you will not be able to say it. And then you'll be defending yourself as not a racist. And there'll be no debate about what immigration does to our labor laws, or to our labor markets. Class is something the press never discusses. It is taboo. And that is why they will not admit that this election was all about a class revolt. And it was. And it is. And it still is. And I hope these people take heart and stick with Mr. Trump. And I hope that Mr. Trump will not abandon them when all these rich people say, oh, no, you can't mess up with these trade bills. Because these trade bills have destroyed the middle class. And then listen, I'm not against international trade. Before Jimmy Carter, the post-World War II order was that we had trade with other countries, but we had tariffs. We didn't trade with dictators. We would only trade food and medicine with a dictator, like the Chinese. But if they, cleaned up their act, we might trade more. We might lower some tariffs. But I think that these single trade bills are a lot better than these big ones, because I don't like trading with people who don't care about human rights. So yes, and the press also suppresses the whole story of torture. We have tortured people around the globe, and the Chicago police tortured people for 24 years. I heard that on NPR. Excuse me, I have to some water. NPR reported that last summer, I think it was. I was driving to a gig and heard it, and that the City Council of Chicago had set up a reparations fund with $5 million to pay for the victims of 25 years under Democratic presidents, mayors mostly, of this torture, day in and day out. The Chicago police torturing people against the Eighth Amendment, against all the laws we have against torture. And the press, NPR thought that was only worth one time. I only heard it once. Now, they might have done it a couple of times that day. But, you think a story like that, American torture, they were torturing American citizens, not Arabs in some other country. They were torturing American citizens day in and day out. And guess what? Most of them were black and Hispanic. Very few white people were tortured. In the Chicago Police Department, you feel sorry for them? They have brought on every problem they have. They are cowards. They are cowards. It takes no courage to torture somebody. It takes no courage to hit somebody that's tied up or to point a gun at their head. And that's what the Chicago police did. And Rahm Emanuel, this Democrat, was sitting at the top of that big pile of garbage. You can see torture really pisses me off. And I'm sorry, it does. Now, NPR has a name for torture. It's enhanced interrogation. But they don't like to say that. They like to say EIT instead, because they can't actually use the euphemism as too direct. They use an acronym for the euphemism. So it's also called a technical interview. If anybody says they want to do a technical interview with you, get away. But when it comes to free speech, and they suppress all these topics. Our press does, our corporate press, our fascist corporate press. You never hear about the skinheads. They never get to have their say. And they should. You know why? Because they're Americans, like me and you. And they have free speech rights, too. We're back. I'm sorry. I think something just happened. If not, I'm sorry. I paused. But anyway, I think skinheads should have their say because they are citizens. And, dialogue is the wise way to go. Dialogue is the path of freedom. It's the path of choice. And suppressing free debate, like the press does, and like the Southern Poverty Law Center does, which I'll talk about in just a minute, that's the path of tyranny and force. I gave the Southern Poverty Law Center a bunch of money once, and then I started getting their mail, and I realized, oh my God, I've given money to a hate group. They're making lists of people that they're putting on notice that you shouldn't talk to or do business with or let them on your show. They're making blacklists. They're trying to suppress speech. And if you suppress the skinheads, and I don't agree with the skinheads, I like black people. I slept with black people. I love them. They're great. They're nice people. I've loved them in every way you can love a black person. And I've slept with everybody from just about every nation. And that's another story. But, as a gay man, I really haven't slept around that much. Gay men have slept around much more than I have. But that's what I'm really digressing. So I don't give money to the Southern Poverty Law Center because, it's so easy to become what you hate. And they have proven that. And, the ACLU is not a friend of our civil rights. The Southern Poverty Law Center is not a friend of free speech either. And, I'm sorry to see the country go this way. And I'd like to see more free speech and more challenging of that free speech. So anyway, let's move on. Our new president, President Trump, he is the result of the working class. And they revolted against this corporate press and their corporate government. And in spite of the educated elite's ridicule and slander and sneering of the working people, they still prevailed. They were too smart to believe in the usual lies of the press, and they voted, and democracy worked. And sorry so many of you all hate democracy. Now, I know we're almost out of time. U.S. Representative Lynn Cheney, this was on the torture thing, she's a Republican from Wyoming, and she tweeted that Trump's statement suggesting moral equivalence between Putin's Russia and the USA is deeply troubling and wrong. Now, that's very rich, coming from the daughter of the father of U.S. torture, the man who made torture a global industrial scale thing in our country. Her father, who birthed this into being and stained our nation forever. And of course, this was in the most pathetic paper on earth, USA Today. And of course, we've heard about Duterte. He's killing people in his war on drugs, and he's stopped it. He stopped the killing for now. But I just want to add real quickly that Obama was his role model when it came to extrajudicial killings, because Obama used drones, the most cowardly weapon ever invented by our egg-headed people at MIT. The most cowardly weapon there is. He used that to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, who was an American citizen, and his 2 children, who were born in America. They did not get due process. They didn't get any of the Bill of Rights. They got a Hellfire missile is what they got from Trump. Excuse me, Mr. Trump, from Mr. Obama, who set the tone, who set the stage for extrajudicial killings. And there was no hearing whatsoever. So this is our great liberal democratic land, and it's probably time to wave it. We are running out of space. I had a lot to say about globalization. I'm just going to save it for next week, and about greed. But I would like to say this, the Democratic Party was on NPR this morning talking about, what they should do. And there's some Democrats called the Young Turks, and there's some called the Resistors. And I've got to tell you, you probably aren't going to be welcome in the Democratic Party because it's a corporatist party. And if you think that you can work with those leaders, just remember, they're corrupt. They cheated. Debbie Wasserman Schultz got caught cheating in the primaries, lying and cheating. She did both. And they got rid of her, and they put in Donna Brazile, who promptly started lying and cheating and feeding debate questions to Hillary, who took the debate questions and lied and cheated too. And I suppose that she's still the titular head, I don't know. John Podesta, corrupt. Bill Clinton, corrupt. The most corrupt ever. So if you think, you really need to get rid of these leaders. We have to get rid of these leaders and get new leaders because the ones we have are corrupt. And they have no vision. But I have a vision. I have a vision of a country that protects and uplifts its own people and also allows other countries to do the same. And these countries can trade with each other. But it would be something that would come from the people. These trade deals, I'll say this about global trade. They make it sound like it was inevitable, that it was just some evolution. Because of computers, we had to have global trade with every kind of sick tyrant on earth. Well, that's not true. It came from the top down. It came from the Chicago School and the Ivy League schools. It came from people like Larry Summers and Bill Clinton. It came from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And there was never any debate. It was nothing that the people wanted. And Ross Perot was right. There was a giant sucking sound, and it was our jobs going bye-bye. So we'll hit all this next time. But I will say this, it's going to be hard for Mr. Trump to take that cookie jar away from the Democrats and the Republicans, these global trade deals. They did a lot. They tortured a lot of people to get it. They tortured people in Chile. Milton Friedman was meeting with Pinochet as he tortured his own people for this free trade with tyrants agenda. Tyrants like Pinochet. And they're not going to, if they would torture to get this cookie jar, what do you think they will do to keep it? So beware. Beware. You're watching this show, they know you're watching. But my Lord, Jesus Christ, knows that there are a lot more important things than money and GDP. And one of those is love. But the rich, they're always with us, right? Okay. I can't, I've changed things and I don't see where, here it is. Okay. All right. Let's wrap this show up. I'm sorry I've been so disorganized, but we're not in our usual location, and we're going to try to find a regular studio. Anyway, these lawsuits that were filed about the temporary immigration ban were organized, flood of lawsuits. It was organized by the state governors and the Democratic Party. So just know that. And this was reported by the Wall Street Journal. And to me, they're using the law to subvert democracy. They're litigating foreign policy. And they're really trying to commit castration by litigation. And this is abusing the law. And these are frivolous lawsuits, I think. And I want to say this about sanctuary cities, too. If you think about what a sanctuary city is doing, they're doing what John C. Calhoun did, nullifying. They're trying to nullify federal law. So just think about that for a little while. Are the sanctuary cities nullifiers? We'll talk about that maybe next week. So all you real liberals out there and all you good working people, be strong. All you people who love liberty and freedom, just be strong. And all you people who love and are not afraid of an open debate, be strong. I know what it's like to be vilified. I know what it's like to be blamed. I know what it's like to be sneered at and ridiculed and ostracized. And I know what it's like to be called stupid. And I know what it's like to be called backwards or deplorable. But sometimes I feel like the only hug I can get is when I put on my skinny pants. But I know that there's good people out there. I know because they voted against the corporate press. They did. I'm so impressed with the people who put Trump into office. And I pray for Trump, and I hope he'll be wise, and I hope he'll think of everybody and what's best for this entire country. So keep being skeptical of our corporate press. Hold your heads up high and meet all this hatred with compassion. And don't let a bunch of freedom-hating, greedy, selfish, cheating liars grind you down. And don't look to your abusers for approval. You'll never get it. Thank you for watching Still Kicking with Billy Hauer. We'll be back next Tuesday, God willing, at 7:30, live, I hope. That is, if I'm still kicking. Live up, be free, and if I can't dance, then you can keep your revolution.